Hi, I'm Althea Tait, and really I'm not here to tell you anything new, sorry. And additionally, there's no PowerPoint, sorry again. I'm here just to remind you of some things you already know, and if you have been using them, great. If you haven't, brushing up on them and re-implementing them in your classroom or whatever station you are in the university. And the brief talk that I have, it focuses on aspects of my teaching, but I think the points are applicable for all stations here at Old Dominion University. When I received my first Shining Star Award, I was amazed at the potential to influence a student beyond the present academic endeavors to the more distant pursuits of what they might accomplish in their futures as critical thinkers, citizens, and potentially parents. Subsequent awards have humbled me, causing me to even think of the palimpsest of influences that bleed through my ability to inspire them. So I'm thinking of the professors that inspired me and how it's trickling down through the generations. And I believe it puts us in a position to prompt students to consider their dreams and where they can move from once they leave my classroom. And I believe all of their dreams are accomplishable, those that are solid. I'm not talking about, hey, I want to go to the moon and you're not trying to be an astronaut, but the more grounded ones that are deeply in their heart that maybe they're intimidated by. For the next 10 minutes, I'll take you through a few points I think contribute to our potential to inspire students. And considering the nature of my discipline, African American Studies and Women's Studies, both which rely heavily on empirical experiences in relationship with theory, I'll ask you to consider some of these points. And as I ask you to consider some of the points, you'll actually need to write down some of the things I'm asking you to think about. So the first point that I want to remind you of is transparency. Expressing the necessity of transparency in a class allows a student to bond with other students and to trust me as a professor. I always remind them on the first day that I'm human. And I hope that if I make an error, I can readily acknowledge that error and make it good with them. And I think that encourages them as well to respect me even more, and I respect them. And so it builds this bond between us. In fact, I usually do what I call chemistry building exercises the first few weeks. And this just allows students to get more comfortable with one another so that when you ask them to share in class, they're already comfortable with some of the people they know, and it's less of an intimidating task. The greater the transparency in the class, the greater participation of students. And in the active participation, I believe they are taking ownership of the material more so. Here's an example. I teach the class Beauty and Performance, Black Women Writers. And typically I ask students to comment on what they consider to be beautiful. And I'm going to ask you to do that actually right now. For the next 2 minutes, because this is a universal theme that you don't have to have a knowledge of Kant or Aquinas to understand what beauty is for you, I'd like you to just write your notes on what you think beauty is or what is beautiful to you. 2 minutes. I bet you weren't expecting this, huh? Okay, I see some people looking up at me, so that it looks like a good fair number of people have already concluded their thoughts. Can we have one of the mobile microphones, and can I have one person share exactly what their thoughts on beauty were? Someone who's comfortable in doing that? Anybody want to raise their hand? There's someone back there.
Honesty with caring, laughter, and empathy.
Honesty with care, laughing, and empathy. And you, caring. And was it laughing?
No, laughter.
Laughter and empathy. She's described these characteristics or qualities or deeds involved with beauty. And this is something that Kant would make an argument in 1790 on beauty. So one of the things you're beginning to do is already make the student aware of what they already know about the subject. And so it removes this distance between the scholar or the theorist who's written about me and what I should think 200 years ago to actually what they already know as a person. I think that removing that veil of intimidation is key in getting a student to take ownership of the intellectual experience. The second point I'll remind you of is challenge. It is a delicate dance in figuring out just how much to challenge a student in the presence of his or her peers, but is a part of their development. Traditionally, I tell students that if they do not throw a book across the room, or they are not tempted to call me the Wicked Witch of the East at some point in the semester, I have not done my job. The area of challenge may be in the areas of their critical thinking, their writing, or classroom etiquette. These aspects of the classroom allow for opportunities of mentorship. I want to read to you an email I just received from one of my students about a week ago, who is a student who at times had challenges with being tardy because he was a working father and his wife was having their second child. Rather than condemning him or making him feel bad about his, tardiness, I brought him aside and said, look, you're one of the most brilliant kids I have in this class. What is it with the tardiness? And this allowed us to have a dialogue about what was the causative of the tardiness. And it actually gave me a room to say, would you do this at your job? And he said, no, I can't afford to do this at your job. So I want you to have the same priority for this class, because larger picture, you having a college degree is going to help you to be able to provide in a greater way for your family. Here's the email he said. Hello, Dr. Tait. Thank you so much for your generous extension. They had trouble with a child at the last minute, and so I gave them a week's extension for the paper. It truly was appreciated by all of us as well as the newest council. I truly enjoyed your class, and each day I came, I learned something significant. From issues with our society, a new vocabulary word, or just something about myself. You were truly a blessing and delight to have as a professor, and I appreciate you going above and beyond the typical call of a teacher. It was a constant throughout your course. You truly tried to bring out the best in me, and I thank you for that. I am also interested in speaking with you about the graduate level programs in women's studies, as I plan to continue my education upon my graduation from ODU. Thank you once again on behalf of myself, my wife, and my sons. So here is an instant where I challenged him about an etiquette issue that would affect him in life, and it opened up this door to where he's even considering women's studies, possibly in graduate studies. And this is, by the way, a student whose degree is in exercise science, completely distant from my field of women's studies. And I think that this is highly important for what we're doing. The third point is to tap into their future potential. At some point in the semester, I try to make contact with students in the way of their future. This may take place by simply asking for a show of hands of the number of individuals who see themselves matriculating into graduate school. I attempt to follow up with those who express a desire in graduate studies, which allows me to hear more of their dreams and aspirations. I also make the attempt to prompt conversations regarding the future with students who did not raise their hand, because like many of us, they simply needed someone to initiate the concept with them, or maybe they are having another pursuit in mind. But the mere fact that I ask them about their future builds a greater rapport between us. And I have another point, but for the sake of time, I've had my time cut and I've got 2 minutes working with me. One of the things I ask students, so I'm being honest here and transparent, right? One of the things that I traditionally ask my students at one point in the semester is to consider an unfulfilled goal or dream, and then to have concrete goals as to how they'll achieve that. Whether it's drinking more water, whether it's being more on time and more punctual, whether it's having better study habits, whatever it is. And then I ask them to email me those concrete goals. And this is a way to hold them accountable in some ways. Most students won't do it, but the students who really need to do it usually do email me this sort of contract, per se, of accountability. The fourth and last point I will share with you today, and by the way, there's no strict adherence as to what order these points come into play, right? But the point is hindrances. We must address any hindrance that may be interfering with the student's trajectory to success. A hindrance may be a family emergency, a bout with situational depression, which we've just spoken of with regard to disabilities, or a personal crisis. It is my job, I believe, to guide them in a manner that allows them to remain accountable to their priorities while helping them to remember that momentary weaknesses do not constitute failure. They can overcome present obstacles and ultimately achieve their dreams. Now, I am going to ask you to do this. I would like you to think of a former dream that was threatened by an obstacle. Can you remember a mentor or professor who helped you through that rough patch? If so, what did they do successfully with you? 1 minute, and this is my final minute. So that's an actual prompt for you. It might have been the death of a parent, or your parents' relationship going through a divorce or a major breakup, something that threatened your success as a student. What did one of your mentors do for you? And have deep looks. Okay, is there someone who can share that one thing with us, who feels comfortable in what they're,
My father was very negative about my interest in going on to grad school. And I shared that with the person that was a mentor my senior year, and he said, oh, that's ridiculous. And he said, decide this semester, it was the first semester of my senior year, what you want to write on in grad school. And for the rest of the time that you're an undergrad and in grad school, take classes and write papers toward that subject, and you'll be out in no time. And it was.
wow, thank you. So essentially, as I said, I've just reminded you of some of the pointers, and they might seem menial, but they're so essential when it means getting these students through the process and them onto their place in their lives where they'll be successful, and getting those notes back from them, such as this one student, this email. I mean, I love research. I'm about to go to New York and dig in archives in a month. I love that. But this is also a delight, and it just makes everything that I do have even greater meaning, especially on those days where you don't want to go in the classroom. So I hope that you've been encouraged, and if you have any thoughts, suggestions, or any things you think I should tweak, please do send me an email. Thanks.